It was a blizzard. It was like 2 feet of snow already on the ground. It was a crazy, crazy feeling, getting dressed in the middle of the night because my brother did not show up. He did not come home. I was shaking from being scared. There was no explanation, and we didn't just disappear, ever. First, we went up to the office, his desk, his chair. He was nowhere to be found. Then we went for the cameras. Can't even describe it. That's how bad it was.
In the wee hours of the morning, we received a call about a missing person, a Hasidic male named Menachem Stark. We went to Menachem Stark's office on Rutledge Street because he didn't come home, and it was not like him to not come home.
Well, his wife told me that she's trying to call him one after the other. First a ring, then someone did pick up, but no response, and then it ringed again, and then it stopped ringing. So it didn't smell right. Once we had the cameras, we knew right away.
So you can see that's my brother right there. That's our office. And there's this guy. He comes out.
The snow did make the cameras very hard to view, made them more grainy than they were normally. We noticed Menachem Stark walking out of his office towards his car.
And then the guy comes in from behind.
A 4-minute fight ensued.
And puts him on a chokehold,
causing Menachem to fall to the floor. And then we saw 2 males lift up Menachem Stark and put him into a sliding door of a minivan.
The way they put him into the car, he wasn't conscious at the time. It really looked like he wasn't alive.
I don't think we have a missing persons anymore. I think it's a kidnapping.
We realized that this was no longer a missing person case. This was a kidnapping case.
We should call this a... Yeah.
So they knew they had to get to him, and they knew they had to get to him quickly. But the New York winter certainly didn't help the investigation.
By the time we had been notified, the snow had already covered tire tracks, it had covered footprints. So we were not gaining very much from the initial crime scene.
You can't see the faces of the attackers, the license plates are blurred. Ultimately, at that point, other than proving Menachem Stark had been abducted, the tapes offered no other clues.
And so they worked with what they had.
We took Menachem's car that was found at the scene back to the precinct to see if there was any clues that led to his disappearance.
The most important thing we do are the initial interviews, because if there were some issues, if someone had been stalking him, if someone had made threats and the family was aware of it, we'd want to know that right away.
Stark belonged to a sect of Judaism called the Satmar, a very, very insular sect, even among Orthodox Jews.
Menachem Stark's wife, she's a mother of 7 children, and she's considerably upset. I mean, how could you blame her?
He's very strict about getting home.
She was very strong, very strong. She was telling the kids some story, which they found out in the synagogue later, that the real story, but she kept very strong about it. But I was feeling terrible. It's heartbreaking. But sometimes in life, you have to face certain... All we had is basically faith, prayers, and we hope for the best.
The Post found out about the story shortly after the kidnapping happened.
I mean, this had the makings of a big story. I mean, it was someone being kidnapped off the street, but particularly when you're talking about a community as insular as the Satmar Orthodox community, you could tell that this was something that was beyond some random street crime. Something here was amiss. We had a feeling that the story was going to blow up. Several hours later, about 3:30 in the afternoon, 20 miles away in Great Neck, Long Island, cops got a call from the owner of a gas station.
There was an employee who had went out to take something to the trash, and he smelled a foul odor, so he called police.
The body was face down, basically stiff. He had burn marks on his hand, his right hand, and his lower body was burned pretty severely. My thought was somebody must have had an idea that, hey, we'll light the body on fire and we'll destroy the evidence. It was just that they started the fire and then threw him on top of it, and then he smothered the fire.
They found a body. They didn't have any identification, but his distinctive clothing did tell them one thing.
Black pants, black vest, white shirt, and we found the yarmulke in the dumpster.
It wasn't going out on a limb to say that they thought that this was the same person that was abducted from Brooklyn.
So the body was taken to the medical examiner's office, where it was determined that he had died from asphyxiation. But in order to determine that this was Menachem Stark, police needed to go to his family and have them identify the body.
It was very heartbreaking to hear such news. But for the Jewish burial is the halacha, which is the law, is that you bury in the same day as you die. So we had to go to identify him. Yeah, it was probably the worst day in my life. But I knew that he would do that for me. We did not know what hit us. We felt like it's the end of the world. We didn't know how we're gonna cope with it. We didn't even think. Basically felt like everything just came to an end. I did not think I can just go on in life. I thought this is it.
This had to have been a deeply painful situation for the family, especially when you consider their history.
I got into more details. I heard details. Just terrified. The Jewish religion, burning a body is we don't believe in that, so it's lots of pain. Our grandparents in Auschwitz went through this. They burned the bodies. It was very heartbreaking.
We're here, we gathered here to let the people know that we lost a big loss in our family, in our community. He was a very beloved person.
It's difficult to speak. Nobody can describe the pain and see the 3 young children saying Kaddish the prayer for the soul of their father who was brutally murdered. In the streets of New York City, in Brooklyn, the picture of a lovely family, a blossoming tree that has been cut to its branches. Children do not have a father. A wife does not have a husband. Why? What did he do?
We're detectives, we're all human beings. It's never a good day when somebody gets killed. But when you're a homicide detective, you push that aside, do what we have to do, find out who killed this person and why, and get closure to the family.
Investigators now needed to find out who wanted Menachem Stark dead. And to do that, they had to figure out what secrets he was hiding.
Investigation Discovery, part of the Discovery family of networks.
What an unprecedented time. No better time for sure to lift each other up, to stay kind, to stay safer at home.
Home together with the Discovery family of networks.
While the NYPD began its investigation, word had gotten around that Menachem Stark's body had been found, and the community took it hard. To have something like this happen was just an absolute shock.
Menachem was very well known in the community. He spent his entire life in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. Everyone knew who he was. I first heard about what happened to Menachem through my landlord, Al. It's very odd because New York City is such a big, wild, and crazy city. You know, you really do have those small town moments. So when I found out that Al's brother had been murdered, I felt terrible.
We are 7 years apart. We had a special connection. He made everyone feel like it's between you and him.
Hasidic families can be quite large. Menachem was one of 10 kids. And he and his wife very quickly started a family of their own with 7 children.
He made himself available to his kids at any time, whether it was early morning at 4:30 a.m. to take his kids to go to yeshiva. He was a very committed father.
Menachem was a very religious man. He spent a lot of time in the synagogue. But unlike some of his other family members who kind of made a living working in the religious bodies of the Jewish faith, Menachem had another calling, and it was real estate.
He was working in a sweater factory when the sweater business died down, and he had no work. So basically all those buildings were empty and it was available. So he decided to take all buildings and convert it to lofts. And actually went better than what he expected.
From there, Menachem became a real estate king. He was there when Williamsburg changed from a dangerous, crime-ridden neighborhood to a yuppie haven. So he was able to cash in on all of that, and he got in at the ground floor.
Menachem was really thought of within the real estate community as someone who was an innovator and a visionary.
So he started up a real estate company called Southside Associates. So he was doing very well for himself.
And in 2000, real estate became a popular vocation among Hasidic men.
Oh, my friend. Good to see you. How are you?
He would advise people. He was trying to help out and make sure other people get successful in the same field that he was.
Looking at this building over here.
Wonderful.
He would give his own things away. He would make others priority before himself. His next-door neighbor lived very poor. He was there once to borrow something from him, but he saw the condition of the house, and he ordered the next week a full renovation into the house. He just paid it from his own pocket. It's a lot of stories like that. He had a golden heart.
So people in the neighborhood really struggled to understand why someone would want to do this to Menachem. But they really didn't have time to let it sink in because according to Jewish law, he had to be buried within 24 hours of his death.
That funeral seemed like everyone from any Hasidic sect in Williamsburg community came out to pay respect. The streets were packed. There was thousands and thousands of people on the street.
Menachem's body was carried down Marcy Avenue, and it was a way to show respect, a way to show honor, and it was a way to say goodbye to him, and a way for the community to say goodbye to him.
There was a lot of speeches there, many rabbis. What was saying is all the good things, all the good deeds that he did in his past. And basically he was taken away from us.
So there's really no doubt that within his community, Menachem was loved and respected. But once NYPD investigators took a step outside the community, that's when things started to get a little dark.
Menachem was definitely not a beloved landlord. He bought the buildings, rented the apartments, did nothing as far as repairs. The city, I believe, had closed down at least one of his buildings.
So while the police were doing their investigation, the Post was also doing a separate investigation. There were numerous complaints against his buildings, complaints by tenants.
Lots of people were very, very unhappy. There was one person who wrote, should the murderer be caught, that they should be sentenced to live in one of Menachem Stark's buildings.
So more and more what we were hearing was his tenants were referring to him as a slumlord.
The possibility of a really angry tenant definitely came out to be something we had to look into. So we decided that we would go out and we would start interviewing some of the tenants.
They found that some tenants liked him, some didn't.
He didn't fix a leaky toilet. Was this tenant gonna go kidnap him and kill him? It just didn't make sense to us at the time. Nobody had strong enough feelings for us to feel that they had any reason to kill him.
But it made you wonder, this man who, by all accounts, was well respected in his community, seemed to be wealthy, seemed to have money, and yet the people living in his buildings were, in some cases, living in squalor. So police needed to figure out why this was the case.
Police now started looking into Menachem Stark's financials, and they found out that while everybody in the neighborhood looked at him as this big, rich landlord, but he wasn't that rich, and in fact, he owed money.
We found out that in the past there had been a bankruptcy claim, and there were some financial issues going on within the business itself.
He, like many people, was a victim of the 2008 recession, and he had been borrowing money at a rate that he couldn't keep up.
It's really a chain reaction. People weren't making money, they had no jobs to go to, and people fall behind their rent. It means that the company is falling behind, it's falling apart.
Menachem was millions of dollars in debt, really struggling to keep his head above water, all while trying to support a family with 7 children.
He must have been stressed for the financial crisis at the time, but he dealt with crisis very well. Everything went on normal. He kept it together, very well together.
That's when investigators started to realize something was strange.
It appeared that a lot of his business accounts had money missing. One was supposed to have $300,000 in it, and it had less than $4. Another was missing $1.5 million. But it turned out that Menachem had taken out the money to pay off other loans, lawyers' fees, a number of things, all of a personal nature.
The problem was, it wasn't just his money. He had a business partner.
This is all he counts. Where's the money? We're missing money.
Menachem's partner, who he had this joint account with, might have been pretty upset. Might have led him to do something crazy.
Sorry doesn't cut it!
Money is a big motive when it comes to murder.
Where's our money?
Once police realized that Menachem Stark was using company funds to pay off private debts, they started taking a harder look at his partner.
That could be something that we would look at as motive for murder.
At the same time police were investigating Menachem's business dealings, our investigative reporters here at the Post were also investigating. And what we found was shocking.
Southside was in major trouble. They were in danger of losing almost half their properties to foreclosure. They were also tens of millions of dollars in debt after defaulting on several loans, one for $29 million back in 2008.
So overall, these guys were $40 million in the hole. As a father who is always looking out to protect your family, he had to have been feeling pretty desperate. If that was the case, then maybe Menachem felt justified in taking the money because he needed to protect his family.
The question for investigators was, would Menachem's partner be so understanding?
Menachem, I just saw the accounts.
We know he borrowed over $200,000 from the joint account.
So police questioned him, and his partner was like,
We always borrowed money from the accounts. If it wasn't him, it might have been me.
no, it was okay. You know, he understood. He had a big family. He had to pay off debts, but cops weren't buying it. Finally, his partner admitted that it had caused some tension.
He did have an argument with Menachem over missing money.
We're missing money. I know. You know how do you know this?
But he was very forthcoming about the disagreement.
Let me explain.
Explain!
For this, I have an idea, and we're gonna be back on top just like we were.
And then, when the financial records came back, we realized that the money problem was actually resolved prior to Menachem Stark being killed.
And after verifying his alibi, his partner was in the clear. But even though he didn't kill Menachem Stark, that didn't mean that something else wasn't going on here. So the cops questioned his partner about their defaults, and that's really when he started to get nervous.
Here's what I need you to explain. I have a deposit here, $200,000 coming in from the Bank of Chicago.
A lot of the stuff, it appeared just to us, it was a little shady. It just, it wasn't the way normal business was conducted.
Who were you borrowing money from, if not them?
We found out that they had dealings with Russian gangsters from the other side of Brooklyn.
We had no choice. We would have lost everything. Everything.
The mob is not a good place to borrow money from. They always get their money one way or another. And once he figured out that they don't fool around, he might have then thought that he had to get the money somewhere.
There's no way that he can pay that money back. How did he plan on repaying this money?
Under pressure, the business partner admitted that in order to keep their properties afloat and pay back the mob, Ian Menachem turned to loan sharks.
Menachem and his business partner borrowed $500,000 from a businessman.
I need to talk to you about a loan. Well, no, this is not the place, nor the time to talk about this, okay?
He was lending money to people who were desperate.
I'll give you a call tomorrow.
Now, being in such severe debt, they were worried about being able to pay the loan shark back.
What you guys think I'm telling you?
So now the partner became very concerned. He was wondering if Menachem Stark's death was because of the money that was owed by the company. And if they killed Menachem, was he next?
Now I'm worried.
Menachem Stark and his partner didn't learn from their first mistake. They borrowed from the mob. And then they compounded things by borrowing from this loan shark.
So detectives tracked this lender down.
$500,000.
We brought him in for an interview. He came in voluntarily.
It's a lot of money.
For you.
Yes, but it's not uncommon in our part of the world.
He explained to us that that's what he does. He lends money, and he's lent money to Menachem Stark and his business partner in the past.
Did you come up with a repayment schedule with him or anything of that nature?
Oh, that hadn't been discussed yet.
We realized that it was sort of a normal way of doing business in the rough and tumble world of Brooklyn real estate.
It just doesn't make any sense.
Why doesn't that make sense?
I just lent him the money.
He told them that he had just transferred money to Menachem on the day that he died, giving him no opportunity to pay the money back.
That's how we do it in Williamsburg.
It was a shady business deal, but you wouldn't kill the guy you just gave $500,000 to.
So while the police were struggling to find a suspect, frustration started to mount within the Satmar community.
In the Jewish religion, it's very important to catch the killers because they have a saying, the blood does not rest until the killers are getting justice.
But it was more than just frustration with the pace of the case itself. Members of the community were becoming really upset with the way that Menachem was being portrayed publicly as a slumlord.
It was across the board by all of the outlets, and I think that was very painful for people to hear.
He wasn't the man the media painted him. I did speak to his former tenants, many of them, which they totally disagree to what they wrote about him. It's just the opposite. He was, on a personal level, connected to them, friendly with them. He was actually a great human being.
I hate the fact that I have to come here and defend a good man for people that love gossip and love to talk nonsense.
I mean, this is a very difficult situation. You had a community that was grieving the loss of one of their own at the same time that they were seeing him being excoriated publicly. For journalists, this presents a particular issue because obviously you've got a murder victim and you want to be sensitive to the family, you want to be sensitive to a community. At the same time, you have to go where the story takes you and you've got to bring it to light because it may be very relevant. And in this case, it was relevant.
So we started to put pressure on the detectives working the case.
So police continued canvassing and recanvassing, going back to the neighborhood where this had all happened, and then someone down the street handed them a bombshell.
We were able to recover additional video from down the block on Rutledge Street, and what it showed was a van that looks very similar to the van that abducted Menachem Stark, sitting on the block 6 hours prior to Menachem Stark being abducted. And the van wasn't just sitting there by itself, there was somebody in it, because we saw a male get out of the car and walk up the block.
They've been sitting there all this time.
So cops obviously are thinking they're out there for 6 hours waiting for Menachem. But within that 6 hour period, Menachem was in and out. So why were they still there hanging around?
It's just weird.
Cops realized that, okay, Menachem was moving around, but there was something that was staying put.
Tracking him, they're tracking his car.
Son of a bitch. Yeah, it must be a tracking device, something like that.
It's the only thing that makes sense. We gotta take a better look at his car.
So we had crime scene investigators search.
Got something?
And then there it was. A cell phone strapped to the gas tank of Menachem Stark's car, and it blew the case wide open.
Detectives subpoenaed phone records and found out that the phone belonged to a man in Brooklyn.
We ran the name, and we happened to find that he had a Dodge Caravan. That's the color and make of the car that abducted Menachem Stark.
As luck had it, the owner has unpaid parking tickets, and we're able to pull him over and take possession of the van.
So detectives got the van back to the precinct. They had a CSI team go over every inch of it, but really all they needed to do was look in the cabin because everything they were looking for was right there.
Pictures back from the lab.
One of the initial things we found was a rent check that Menachem Stark had picked up the night that he was killed.
No.
We also discovered blood, DNA, zip ties.
Blood on the tie matches. The blood on the carpet matches Menachem.
So we realized right away that Menachem Stark was actually abducted by this van.
So cops knew it was time to have a conversation with the owner of this van.
So the minivan involved in Menachem's kidnapping happens to be registered to you. You want to tell us about it?
Yeah, this is a company work van, so everybody uses it.
He claims that he didn't even know that the van was registered in his name and that it belonged to his partner, that it was used for all sorts of jobs.
How many employees use the same van?
We asked him what he does and if he knows Menachem Stark, and he said that he and other guys work as a crew to do work on Menachem Stark's building.
But when the police brought up the cell phone, that's when he became alarmed.
I don't know how he got there at all.
He swore up and down that he had nothing to do with it, but that he had a pretty good idea who did. So police confronted the man who owned the van used to kidnap Menachem Stark about the cell phone that they found under Menachem's car.
Yes, it's my phone.
He admitted to owning the phone, but he said that he lent it to a friend of his, Erskine Felix.
Erskine Felix was also a contractor, and he did a lot of work for Menachem Stark, including Menachem's own home.
Nice to meet you. He told us that Erskine had approached him and asked him to get him a cell phone.
He gave it to Erskine because he was following his girlfriend.
And he said that Erskine Felix was a jealous guy, and he had a girlfriend who he thought was cheating on him, and he said he needed a phone to track her to see if she was doing him dirty.
Now, police checked Erskine's phone records, and they found out that the night of the kidnapping, there were numerous phone calls to 3 people. His cousin, Kendall Felix, his other cousin, Irvine Henry, and his brother, Kendall Felix.
These guys did a lot of work for Erskine as day laborers, and all of them had worked for Menachem Stark.
But apparently, Menachem wasn't keeping up with the paychecks.
There were rumblings that Menachem owed him about $20,000 for past work.
So the pieces were starting to fall together, but the cops still needed more. So they subpoenaed the phone records from the other 3. And what did they find? That on the night that Menachem was kidnapped, all 4 of them were either at the location where Menachem was grabbed in Brooklyn or where his body was found on Long Island.
In most homicide investigations, there's that aha moment. As soon as we put that together, we were like, okay, now we're going to solve this murder.
So what did the cops do? What cops do. They brought all 4 of them in, had them all questioned simultaneously.
If everybody comes in at the same time, people are looking into the other room saying, oh, I wonder what he's saying. I wonder what he's saying.
When police first saw Erskine, they immediately noticed his size. He was a very big man. While they never had a really good face picture from the video, they did know that it was a big man who confronted Menachem Stark that night, and Erskine could have easily been that person.
Okay, you do work for him on his buildings, correct?
Yeah. He says, listen, I do jobs for Menachem. He owes me money, but it's, it's not a big deal. He said that he used to protect Menachem from people that want to do him harm. In fact, he even put a phone on his car to track him just to make sure he knew where he was at all times. I'm thinking that he's full of baloney, but we needed more evidence in order for us to build a case on him.
The interviews with Kendall Felix and Irvine Henry weren't going any better, so it was frustrating to say the least, until they got to Kendall Felix.
You help us out. This is just going to go a lot easier on you. We'll help you. If you help us, we can help you.
There's nothing to tell. There's nothing to tell.
We know you have the information.
I don't have any information.
You know that's not true.
We know about the phone tracking in the car. We know about the van. We got your fingerprint. You got mixed up in something that you didn't need to get mixed up in. And that, that happens, and we understand that. And the judge will understand that. You don't want to go down for something that you didn't have any responsibility for. You just got mixed up in it. Right? Will you help us?
He said this was all Erskine's idea. He was the mastermind. He said, listen, we're just going to grab him. He's going to write us some checks, and all you have to do is drive the van, and it'll be all good.
I didn't mean to hurt anybody.
They didn't expect Menachem Stark to fight. He put up a hell of a fight.
So Kendall went to go help his cousin. And once they got Menachem into the van...
What do we do? Okay, we go. Okay, drive. Okay. What are you doing? Come on, let's go. Let's go, come on. Yo, he's still awake. Yo, he's moving.
He still struggled. And so Erskine sat on him.
Just get in the shot. Get on it, shot. What? What did you do? Why isn't he moving? What did you do? What did you do? What did you do? What did you do? You tell me what you do! Tell me what you did! Shut up and drive! Let's go!
Kendall told us how him and Kendall were directed by Erskine to dump the body.
That's when the two of them went to Great Neck, bought some gas, dumped the body in a dumpster, and set fire to it.
Kendall told the whole thing that happened from beginning to end. We were ecstatic because the case is finally being solved, but then we realized that the only person that we'll be able to arrest that night would be Kendall.
Wasn't looking great because Kendall wouldn't testify against anybody else. So at that point, we had one person under arrest, but probably not the most culpable.
When Erskine walked out the door, it was very frustrating.
So while the rest of the guys who were responsible for this were walking free, Kendall goes to trial. Fortunately, Kendall's trial turned out to be the turning point in the entire investigation.
Will the defendant please rise?
He was looking at anywhere from 25 to life. And I think that's when he realized, maybe it'd be better if I testify against everybody else.
So finally, 3 years after Menachem Stark's death, Erskine Felix went on trial.
And the prosecutors had an airtight case.
They had Kendall that was going to testify. They had a lot of phone records. They had a lot of forensic evidence, DNA, blood that they could show to the jury. I don't want to say it was a slam dunk, but it was close.
This was really phenomenal. We were very excited that this is happening. This is the goal that we really wanted. Justice.
You say you find the defendant guilty of count 1, charging murder in the second degree.
When all was said and done, all 4 men who were involved in Menachem Stark's murder had to face the music. Erskine and Kendall Felix were convicted of murder. Kendall Felix pleaded guilty to conspiracy and hindering prosecution. And Irvine Henry pleaded guilty to tampering with physical evidence.
I was very happy because to the belief that my brother is going to rest now, so it was very exciting news. I actually did know Erskine, was a friend, and Menachem too. We were real buddies with him. I would never think he could do such a thing. It was shocking to me that he as a human being should do such a thing.
In the end, no matter how you look at this is a story that's a tragedy. Nobody deserved to die this way. He left behind a wife, 7 children, a family, and friends. And they're left to pick up the pieces.
His baby son never saw him alive. They just took him away just like that. They robbed the father from the kids, which is heartbreaking. I want people to remember Menachem as a very giving and loving person. When I have trouble, I feel like he's with me. At any time in need, I always think he's looking out for me. Always.